Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, now leasing Phase 3 at the Reserve, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבשחים גם יוחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבשחים גם יוחד.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. With Passover, Pesach, just around the corner, Jews around the world are preparing for the Seder night, a night unlike any other, filled with questions, storytelling, family, singing, and deep meaning. But how do we make our Seders truly powerful? How do we engage not just our minds, but our hearts and our souls? Today, I'm honored to welcome back to our show my teacher, my Rebbe, Rabbi Avi Weiss, a visionary leader and educator, and the author of a brand new Haggadah Yehi Ohr, Let There Be Light. Rabbi Weiss has spent decades inspiring Jewish communities, championing social justice, and reimagining what Jewish life can be, including as the founding rabbi of the modern and open Orthodox Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, the Bait, and founding 2 rabbinical schools, Yeshivat Chovevei Torah for Men, YCT, in 1999, from where I received my rabbinic ordination, and then Yeshivat Maharat for Women in 2009. His new Haggadah isn't just a guide for the night of Passover, it's a call to bring more light into our lives and our world. Together, we'll explore what makes a Seder transformative. How do we connect with its messages in a personal and profound way? And what wisdom can Yehi Ohr bring to our tables this year? Rabbi Avi, such a treat to have you.
It's a pleasure to be on, and even more foundationally, just to reconnect with you.
Amen.
And to be here at JBS. I'm thinking about Mark Golub's memory, and he would be over the top. I have no doubt, so proud of where you're taking JBS to higher and higher levels. It's a great zchut, Justin. I'll always have such deep respect and love for you and your family.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the feeling is very, very mutual. And I am very grateful for any minutes and days I get to spend with you. So thank you so much for the time and for coming into the city for this. So let's just start. Before we get into the Sefer itself or the book, let's go back in time. I want to hear about, for you, the Seder is such a child-focused experience. What are your memories? Do you have special memories of being a child at your Seder with your family growing up?
Well, when I think about decades back, it's a long time ago, I think about memories that I was experiencing as I was experiencing the Seder. Mm-hmm. And then there are memories that I have from 70, 80 years later. Mm. And so within the experience, all the way back when I was a little child, our Starim were very familial. Mm-hmm. I still remember being there with my siblings and little children. We would stand on our chairs to sing the Manishtana. Mm-hmm. And I still remember my uncle Sroka, who had been a veteran during World War II, was seriously injured. Wow. He actually married a woman whom he found when he liberated one of the camps. So I always thought that when Elijah came in, I noticed that Elijah's cup there was less wine in the cup until I caught him shaking the table. Those are the kinds of memories that I have. My mother, Miriam, a blessed memory, doing all she could to prepare, and my father leading the Seder. But when I look back at it, Justin, I'm amazed. Mm-hmm. My childhood was in the late 40s, early 50s. Mm-hmm. We're talking about 5 years, 6 years, 7 years after the Shoah, after the Holocaust. Yeah. And here they were, sitting around the table, opening the door for Elijah, waiting for the Messiah to come, waiting for the world to be a world that's redeemed. Wow. Looking back on that, it's quite remarkable, the power with all that we experienced during the 40s to move on.
Wow.
To go on. Simeni kachotam alibech, ki aza kamavet ava. That's it. to respond to death with love, with family, with continuity, with hope.
Amazing. So did your father lead the Seder?
Old time stuff.
Yeah.
My father had an enormous impact on my life, as did my mother. He led the Seder. He was the boss. And very often the interpretations were the same from year to year, although he was a great Talmid Chacham. He was a real, very, very knowledgeable in Torah, and I appreciate his comments. And I appreciate my mother too. My mother had less of a background, but my mother taught me everyone has something to say. And her creativity is a creativity that will always be with me, as my siblings. I have 4 siblings. We've gone in different directions, and yet there's a togetherness, and I think the love between us, it really was fermented. It was seeded at those Sederim.
Do you have the memory of the first time you led a Seder? When did you start leading Sederim?
Well, the word lead for me is a complicated word.
I should have known.
Like dealing with the founding of Chovevei Torah, our men's rabbinical school, a little bit of a commercial, and Yeshivat Marat, the women's rabbinical school. And by the way, this June, Yeshivat Marat will be celebrating the giving of smicha to the 100th Orthodox woman. Wow. That's quite a deal.
Zalto, that's amazing.
But one of the goals of the leadership of Chovevei Torah is that we, and the we would be Rabbi Dov Linzer, Rabbi Sarah Horowitz, Rabbi Jeffrey Fox, Rabbi Stephen Exler, we didn't want to produce, we didn't want to train followers.
Sure.
We wanted to train leaders.
Sure.
And that's why I love sitting with you. That's why when I even talk about the Haggadah, I use we instead of I. It's a humble I, because much of this commentary has been gleaned from students, from those around the table. So even when I led Sederim, I tried as hard as I could to make sure that everyone felt that they were leading the Seder.
Sure.
At our synagogue, we would, for many, many years, we would advertise a free Pesach Seder, and there's so much that I learned from the people who joined us for those beautiful evenings and the hundreds of people who would come together.
Amazing. And so tell me, for you personally, all these years where you've prepared to lead a Seder, not lead a Seder, but been responsible. Participate in the Seder, but take some responsibility, let's say at minimum, for how that Seder is going to look and what's going to happen there. What's your approach? What's the avoda? What's the practice in terms of both spiritually and practically? How do you prepare for the Seder?
I'm a student of Rabbi Soloveitchik, and he would often say, Ein Kiddusha B'li Hachana. There is no holiness without preparation. Okay. So before Passover and before any of the holidays, try to prepare myself and prepare through reading new commentary as it relates to Passover, to the Haggadah.
Sure.
Maybe spending some time with my loved ones, with my family, walking through God's nature. After all, Passover is not only the time when we celebrate the historical moment of the Exodus from Egypt, but it's also the spring festival. It's when the winter is really turning into the beauty of the spring of Dodi Li Va'ani Lo. And then when coming to the Seder, to do all that I can to stay in the moment. Often we're experiencing something and we're waiting for the next moment. We're worried about the next moment or excited about the next moment, and the present is fleeting. So to all who are listening to this, hold on to those moments when you're with your whole family around the Seder table. Hold it tight. That's my definition of spirituality. Beautiful. Spirituality is not running from the real world, but it's experiencing, being conscious of every moment and understanding that whatever is unfolding, it's with the blessings of God. Both elements. Consciousness of the moment while feeling the presence of God.
Beautiful. I'll say that, I always have, I'm a Musser guy, so I always have some phrase in my head that's driving me. And a couple years ago, my goal was to be radically present. That's what I used to just say. Just be, whatever I'm doing in that moment, be radically present in that moment. I love you adding on the piece, and also be aware of God.
Yeah, because mindfulness could become very self-centered.
Right.
It could be all about the inner ego. It's what I am experiencing alone. But I think the I really experiences when we make space for the we. We make space for our family, for the broader family of the people of Israel, for the state of Israel, and for all of humankind. And we can say thank you, 2 words we often forget to say to those who are closest. Thank you to God for allowing us to experience the beauty of this moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I know you're someone who's certainly a master of ritual. I've attended many weddings. We had the merit to have you sing the 7th blessing at mine and Tali's wedding. I remember sitting with an hour with you in rabbinical school with Avram Lotek, asking you, what is a bris? What are we trying to do in a bris? I want to ask you, when you think of the Seder, like, what is the goal of the ritual of the Seder? If you were to, go up to 10,000 feet and really just imagine, what are you trying to do in a Seder? What are you trying to do in a Seder?
We recall Egypt every day. For those who pray daily, or however one prays, in the liturgy, in the standardized liturgy, there is mention in the Shema. We were once slaves and we were freed. So what is it that we add at the Seder?
Sure.
How is that different than what we do on a daily basis? What's different is that we expand. We tell it as a story, and as different types of stories, because one could experience something, and you can look back, and in memory, one can think about the story in different ways. So we tell the story, and then we learn the story. We actually take 4 sentences from the book of Deuteronomy, and we explicate those sentences. And then we take it to another level. We actually reenact with ritual. We're not only verbalizing through a story or through expounding on a particular text, learning it, but we point to the ritual. Ritual is very, very much a part of what Judaism is about. As a matter of fact, I don't believe anything is remembered in Jewish history if it's not been ritualized. Everything that we remember going all the way back has become part of the ritual. And so what do? We point to the shank bone representing the Paschal sacrifice. We point to the matzah. Matzah is the ritual which symbolizes the food we ate in Egypt and the food we ate when we left, because there wasn't enough time for the dough to ferment.
Sure.
We point to the bitter herbs, and we not only point to it, but in the end we ingest it. It's almost as if we're moving from the past story to the present when we're doing the eating. And as a matter of fact, the latter part of the Seder moves us from past to the present, and the latter part of the Seder moves us into the hope of the future. And so the short answer to your question is, it is to recall what happened in Egypt, but it's to recognize that it's happening again. The word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim comes from the word tzara, distress. For me, October 7th was Mitzrayim. Maybe it was worse than Mitzrayim. And for me, and I think for those sitting around the table, as we were freed from Egypt of old, so too in these dark times we are experiencing a remarkable response of people in Israel, of people in America, everyone doing their share to bring light into the darkness. That's why this Haggadah is called Yehi Ohr, let there be light. On that Simchat Torah in Israel, it was the day when we finished the Torah and we started. And when we started the Torah in the book of Genesis, the first words that God says is God turns to the darkness and says, Yehi Ohr, let there be light.
Wow.
And we're feeling that today. we are really feeling not only the heaviness of the losses, but how remarkable has been, with all of the issues that we face, the remarkable response. And so at the Seder, my thinking is to talk about the past Egypt, from exile to freedom, how it continued through the millennia, and still so much a part of our DNA to this day, in the prayer that one day, we'll be leaving whatever Egypt we're experiencing. And by the way, Justin, not only on a collective communal basis, but on an individual basis. Everyone experiences in Egypt. Everyone has their moments of distress. And the message of the Seder is, keep hoping. Keep hope alive. And the way you keep hope alive is do hope. Speak love, speak hope, act hope. From slavery to freedom, from darkness to light.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So I want to ask you a question on that. So I had the merit to sit with Rabbi Shlomo Katz a few weeks ago in the home of Noah and Ziva Adelsberg, and he brought a text from Reb Tzadok of Lublin about Yeush, about despair. And the text basically brought the idea that actually the birth of the Jewish people, the Jewish family, came from despair, because Abraham and Sarah thought they were never going to have a child. And they had that despair that they would never have a child. And out of that despair came the birth of Isaac and the birth of the Jewish family, and now we are today. And so that was that text seemed to be implying that the idea of Yeush, the idea of despair, of feeling like there's no chance, no hope, is part of the DNA of the Jewish people. I hear you talking about Tsar and Mitzrayim. I guess my question is, why did we need to be slaves? Right? Why is the fabric of the Jewish people meant to constantly be coming back to Tsar? Is this our DNA, that we have to have painful moments repeating themselves in history in order for us to find hope? What's going on there?
Well, built into Abraham and Sarah's despair was hope. I don't think one can experience, or one should seek to experience, despair in an absolute way. The reason they had a child is because within the despair, they still believed. They still hoped. They remained optimistic. I think it was Shimon Peres, when he turned 90, he was always an upper. And they asked him, how do you stay up? And he said something like, well, optimist and pessimist die the same way. They just live differently. I've decided to live as an optimist. So within the despair is the hope. And life is not an existence of absolutes. Again, my teacher, Rabbi Soloveitchik, I think he once said, Eden is not paradise, it's paradox. I want to repeat that.
Yeah.
Eden is not paradise, it's paradox. Part of life is that you could be up, but it's inevitable that you're going to be down. My father would tell the beautiful story. We used to call it the Gib mir a Nagel story.
It's Yiddish.
That's Yiddish,
Okay.
which means give me a nail.
Okay.
It's a story about someone who comes as a poor person from Eastern Europe and is in America marrying off his last child, and he's done very well, and in the middle of the wedding he calls out, "Give me a nagel, give me a nail." People thought he had gone crazy until he explained himself, and he said, life is like, as Maimonides would say, a galgal hachozer, a wheel that's moving, constantly turning. And when I came here, my wheel, if you will, of life was at rock bottom. And here I am marrying off my last child. And so I call out in Yiddish, "Give me a nagel, tain li masmer." Give me a nail. And I can see my father, I'm going to take that nail and knock it into the wheel so it doesn't move. But you know what? It does move. So life is that paradox. Isn't that what Yehuda Amichai said? He said, I disagree with Ecclesiastes. I disagree with King Solomon, who said there is a time for everything a time to love, a time to war. Amichai says, life is too short to experience all of that independent of each other. And he says, both feelings, both emotions can mix. You make love in war, and you can war in love. So my response to your question is, it's built into life. Built into life are highs and lows. And as Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite people, the father of logotherapy and his art, Search for Meaning, he writes, part of life is, what drives us is human beings are seeking meaning. But the key is not only to seek meaning in the good times, but also to seek meaning in the times that aren't so good.
So is there, if I could pull out of there, which, and that was beautiful, two things I hear you saying is that we can't appreciate the good unless we have the bad as well. Three things. A second is this idea of, can we commit to hope in the bad times? And the third is, can you find meaning also in the bad times?
Yes.
And that's why there's this fabric of the DNA of the people that
the words of the Kotzka, that's become a famous song. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. Kol ha'olam kulo. And what are the next words? Gesher tsar ma'od. The word tsar means narrow, but tsar is really the root letters of Mitzrayim. All of life, it could be a narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar, but the main thing is, lo lefached klal. Don't be afraid. Now, fear is an emotion. It's a feeling. So it's not simple to say, don't be afraid. Feelings are not right, they're not wrong. We used to say in Marriage Encounter, they just are. To be poetic, feelings are feelings are feelings. What I think he meant was, the main thing is not to be afraid. The main thing is not to act afraid. Despite the fear, act with hope. Act with optimism.
Beautiful. I'll add to that also. I heard also Shlomo Katz recently say that I think the original Rebbe Nachman says lo lehit pached, and not pached. And pached is a natural response. You fear, but lehit pached is a reflexive thing, choosing to show fear, to rile yourself up with fear.
That's Reb Shlomo.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's Reb Shlomo of old, and that's
amazing.
And that's his disciple, Reb Shlomo Katz, who is
amazing,
one of a kind.
All right, so I hear a few, you said several things already, I'm keeping track of all of them. The first, this idea that there's kind of three parts of the Seder: the past, the present, the future. The past, we're trying to understand the pain we went through, the hope we had, and how we came out of it. The present, actually experiencing it ourselves right now. And the future, you didn't say it explicitly, but I assume the future is building the perfect world, Mashiach, those kinds of things, when you say the future.
There'll never be a perfect world.
Right.
Maimonides says, in fact, this is the stuff of today's pages of the Talmud. It deals with what is Messianic times, and since there are 100 opinions, you know that none of the opinions really are for certain.
Right. Whenever
no
there's
one
a lot
quite
of opinions,
knows. But building towards a Messianic redemptive period means, as Maimonides argues, it's a world as we know it today, but it's a world of peace, God willing. It's a world where people with disparate views, we can talk to each other. In fact, the word Mashiach, Messiah, may be a play on the word Sicha, dialogue. Our ability to respect each other.
Wow.
Not to impugn each other's motives in a negative way.
Beautiful. All right, so I'll pick. There's so many ways to go here. We've discussed already. There's so many things. There is poetry and ritual and commentary in this book, and it's impossible for us to explore it all here. But picking up on the idea of sicha and conversation, let's talk about the four sons. That's one of the hits of the Haggadah. Almost everyone knows the four sons. What do you make of that? What do you bring to thinking about the four sons?
I see the four children.
Yeah.
I think children better than sons.
Amazing. There we go. Step one. Four children. Yeah.
Right. Step one. I call that an educational interlude because it appears between the physical story of our exodus from Egypt, which the Talmud records in the name of Shmuel, and the more spiritual story of the Exodus, which the Talmud records in the name of Rav.
to review, there's 3 parts of the Haggadah in your view, which is until we eat, the first half, that's the past.
Right.
Then there's when we not break from the meal, when we sit for the meal, that's the present. And that's why we're eating food during that time.
Right.
And then the praise and the songs at the end are about anticipating the future. And within that first third, where we're calling the past, you're saying there's kind of 2 interpretations or 2 approaches to telling the story. One is Rav and one is Shmuel. And in between those, we have this break to talk about the 4 sons.
That's why you're a great rabbi.
I read your Haggadah. I read your Haggadah. It was amazing. You could see. If people don't believe me, I beat up this book pretty good. I really read it.
I always say about Rabbi Pines, you can go in a lot of directions. You could be the CEO of JBS, but you could be a rabbi's rabbi of a synagogue or of a school.
Thank you.
You have so much talent within you. But the children, the educational interlude, just reminds all of us that dependent upon who you're talking is the way you tell the story. And so that's extremely critical.
That's already worth the price of admission. Pause, as you say, different people.
Chanoch lanar al pi darko.
Right.
Educate the children according to their way. You thank God are blessed with 4 children. You have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and
9, 7, 5, and turning 3. Please God.
You got to speak to them differently, and they could be the same age, and they could hear the same message, but they've got to hear it differently. And by the way, they should hear it. All of them sitting around the same table. So even though they may be going in different directions.
My wife's family, they point at each other for these. They say, Russia! Like that. It's like
No, we used to come to, when, Rabbi Gamliel says, this is now the ritual, when you point to the shank bone, Pesach, matzah, every time my Tovali, when it comes to Moror, she would point at me, Moror, the bitter herbs. I mean, that's part of the Seder,
that's part of the fun, of course.
If you can't laugh a little bit,
for sure.
What's redemption if you can't? In fact, there's a story in here, in a commentary on the Shir HaMalot, Ozimales Chok Pinu. In the time of redemption, we have to remember to laugh. We have to remember to laugh. I actually quote the story, and you'll remind me what we were just talking about, but it's a beautiful story. When Natan Sharansky was freed, so I took him back to the airport he was going to fly back to Israel, and a man comes up to us, and he says to Sharansky, he says, Sharansky, give me a bracha, give me a blessing. I said, Natan, this is now in the beginning, so all this is new to Natan now, of course. Thank God he understands and he knows. Even then he knew. He was a deeply religious Jew all the way back. I said, Natan, you're a Hasidic Rebbe. He wants a blessing. How do I give a blessing? I said, you just put your hands on his head. Give a blessing. So Natan says to this fellow, he says, you don't understand. He's the rabbi. Who'll give you a blessing? And this man proceeds to say, I know who this rabbi is. I have no interest in his blessing. I want your blessing. And I said, Natan, you got a plane to catch. You may have beaten the KGB, but you're not going to beat this guy. Put your hands on his head and give him a bracha. And Natan puts his hands on his head, and he closes his eyes, and he says, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. He said the blessing over bread. And what I remember about that moment is that this guy was just ecstatic. And I thought to myself, as a rabbi, I'm always looking for blessings for a bar mitzvah, for a bat mitzvah, or for a bride and groom. Imagine if I got up one day and I said, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, it wouldn't go. So even in redemption, even when we tell this story, we shouldn't forget to laugh. That's why one of our patriarchs is called Laugh.
Right. Yitzchak.
Yitzchak. You need the modis of this world.
Yes.
Keep it clean, but you need the modis of this world. And now I forgot what your trend was.
We were talking about the 4 sons. I'll jump in and ask you the Rasha. You know, someone says to you, you tell me, the modern Rasha, who's the Rasha, and how do we counsel parents to un-Rasha
Well,
the
we
Rasha?
try to include here very original commentary. And again, I use the word we because it's really what I gleaned from so many people around the table or in a classroom. Students have become my teachers in the truest way. Now, the Rasha is generally understood as somebody who's in the encampments at Columbia University.
Right.
And the way we understand Hakhei et shinav, that's what the text says, blunt his teeth, break his teeth,
Right.
throw him out.
Yeah.
He's excluded himself from the community, and that's not where I'm at. And the word Hakhei, for me, spells, it has all of the letters of God's name. Hey, Kuf, Hey, Hey. And Shinav may not mean teeth alone. It comes from Vishinantam, and you shall teach them. The way to reach the Rasha is to teach them and reach them with God's love. And the more one strays, the more our language must be unconditional care and unconditional love, or the tam, the simpleton. And so in the Hebrew, the simpleton, the so-called simple child says, Mazot, what is this? And one thinks it's a simple question. But we did a study looking through the Bible. When is the word zot used? This. When is the word zot used in our liturgy? When we pick up the Torah, we say, Vizot HaTorah. Torah is pretty complex. It's multi-layered.
Sure.
Many different levels. So you think a child is asking a simple question, but beneath that simplicity is something profound. As I get older, I like simple. And because it's simple, doesn't mean it's simplistic. Simple could be deep. It could be profound. As a matter of fact, if we really understand an idea, we should be able to say it in a way which is non-pilpul, a way that people can receive, a way that's accessible, the way that is easy to comprehend.
Beautiful. All right, I want to ask you, we'll jump around the Seder here a little bit. One of the questions that I always think about, I've heard you speak before at Kesher in Englewood, New Jersey, about how the way Abraham received God, that God was calling out to the whole world, and Abraham was the only one who heard it.
Right.
I remember that powerfully impacted me when I heard you say that. Moses or Moshe's encounter with God is at the burning bush, the famous burning bush. What do you make of that story? What's going on there? Why is God speaking in a bush to Moses? What's happening there?
Well, traditionally we understand that the sneh is a bush which is very low to the ground. And so one is never alone. God is with us even in the deepest, most difficult moments. And so why does God appear through the thorn bush? Imo onochi bitzara. Afilu behastara shebetoch hastara. Even in the hidden of the hiddenness, one can feel the presence of God, or should yearn to feel the presence of God. My son, who is in the world of scholarship, so he often points out that when Christianity came on the scene, the simple statement of Christianity was to the Jewish people, God has rejected you. The temple has been destroyed. But the rabbinic response was, no, God has not rejected us, but Shechina Bagula, the indwelling, the omnipresence, is even with us in the exile. As a matter of fact, what's the test of love? The test of love is not only when I'm with you when things are going well. Do I love you when things are not going so well? And when it comes to love, the deepest love is not only that I love you, but I know that you love me. I just know that you love me. And so the sneh was that moment where Moses was hearing God saying, I'm in a thorn bush. I feel your pain. No, just know that I love you. And I would argue, if we allow our minds to float in the spirit of the third Gera Rebbe, the Sfat Emet, is that many people passed by that thorn bush. Many people saw it, maybe heard some voices, but they passed it by. The greatness of Moses was he stopped. And he saw within that moment, that experience, something unusual. And he responded, here I am. That's the deepest question in the Torah. God's first question and first are so important is God says, to Adam, and we're all children of Adam, everyone. Ayeka, where are you? God didn't know where Adam was. Of course he did. But Ayeka means that God is saying to each of us, where are you? Have you done your share? And the response to Ayeka is what Moses' response was when he passed the thorn bush. Hineni, here I am. And we're seeing that response in modern times. When there was all of the controversy about judicial review in Israel, there were many flyers who said in the Air Force, we'll never fly again. And then October 7th, and everyone said, Hineni, here I am. To me, this Pesach is a celebration of that Hineni. Everyone is wearing Madei Tzava. We're all wearing the IDF uniform. For some, it's the green fatigues. For others, it's in our clothes. Some by contributing, some by praying, some by learning, some by doing this, some by doing that. That's the power of the moment.
Beautiful. And I love, that's so powerful. And I want to add to that, to quote your words, if I may. You know, you write in here as well that the appropriateness of the sneh, the bush in the time of Moshe, compared to the appropriateness of Mount Sinai, which shares a similar lettering for the giving of the Torah. And it goes back to this wheel you started with, this idea of the high and the low. So at that moment when we're in Mitzrayim, Moshe, God is in the bush, the thorn bush low to the ground, and in that peak moment when we've made our way out of Mitzrayim and we encounter God at the mountain, then God is on a mountaintop for us.
And I want to add quickly that that doesn't mean, God forbid, that someone who doesn't feel God's presence in time of distress, that person is doing something wrong. We really have to understand and give space to those who are struggling with God. My son's first book, Doe's first book, is on the theology of protest. The theology of protest is based on rabbinic traditions in which we're told that we have the right to question God. That questioning God is not a sign of disrespect, but of love. Because if I really love you, I should be able to tell you what's really on my mind and not be fearful that you're going to judge me, that you're going to reject me. So I have a right to say to God, God, where are you? I think it was Eliezer Berkovitz. He wrote in Faith After the Holocaust, he says, everyone who suffered from Hitler Yamach Shemo v'Zichro, being a victim of that anti-Semitism makes you holy. And he says, those who died with God on their lips, Shema Yisrael, died as holy believers. And those who went to their death declaring, where are you, God? Damn you, God. They are no less holy. They're holy disbelievers. And that's been the cornerstone of my rabbinate. Yes, the sneh is, can you feel God's love? But even if you can't, you're just as much a part of our peoplehood, of the larger world community as those who do.
Beautiful.
You know, there's a sentence into the future text from the Hallel where we say, Pitchu li sharei tzedek. We hope for the day when God will pitchuli open up for me the gates of righteousness, and we say tzadikim yavo uvo. Let the righteous come in. Just as who are the righteous? Tzadikim yavo uvo. Tzadikim yavo uvo. You know, I remember once being at a rabbinic seminar, and someone said to me, Avi, you are so non-judgmental that for you there is no such thing as a tzaddik or a rasha, a righteous or a wicked. And I said, I'm sure there is. I'll let God decide who's righteous and who's not.
There's only one judge, and I am not him.
I'm not going to make that decision. And I have a hunch when we get upstairs, it's going to be what we didn't think it was going to be. So I'm spending time on this because even as the sneh is the place where we're hopeful, we can feel God's love. One who doesn't feel that is as much of our peoplehood as the deepest believer.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. I want to take us from there to the makot, the plagues. This is a big piece of, we spent a lot of time on the plagues during the Seder. There's, and it goes in all different directions. They shorten the plagues, they lengthen the plagues. What do you make of what's happening there?
Well, there are actually two branches. Now we're still in the past.
Yes, I know. I have to make sure we have time for the future.
And I think the second branch is a branch that talks about the plagues, God's intercession as we left Egypt. But there is a first approach which really speaks of God's intercession beyond Egypt. Mm-hmm. And part of the language, just shuffling the pages here, is when we say that God intervened miraculously. Mm-hmm. And we put our fingers into the wine, and we spill some wine, and we say, Dam va'ish v'timrot ashan.
Right, this is not everyone, this is less of a hit than some of the others, but this is the first time we dip blood. Before we do all 10 makot, we say those three words and we put a little bit of blood for each of them. Great. Not blood, wine, sorry.
Right, Dam va'ish v'timrot ashan.
Which just translate that for our audience?
Which means blood and fire and pillar of smoke. And so we write in this Haggadah, we write, for me, the imagery of the Haggadah with its support text, explicating wonders as blood and fire and pillar of smoke, may evoke remembrances of the Holocaust, when our blood was spilled as our lives were taken in gas chambers, leading to our being cast into the oven fire with its accompanying smoke. Mm-hmm. That's the power of the verbiage of the ritual. It speaks to contemporary times, Dam va'ish v'timrot ashan. But looking at it very carefully, we then continue saying that just a few years after the Shoah, a wondrous intervention, and that is, of course, the establishment of the State of Israel. Thus, blood, fire, smoke may represent in a dramatically different way the battles Israel fought and continues to fight and defend of itself. In other words, those words, Dam va'ish v'timrot ashan, it speaks to the horror of the Shoah, but it also speaks to contemporary times. From this perspective, the spilling of wine from the Seder cup, as we call out blood, fire, and pillar of smoke, may symbolize for our generation the spilling of Jewish blood when they were victimized during the Shoah, and the spilling of blood over the thousands of soldiers and victims of terror who gave their lives protecting the land of Israel. It's the spilling of blood that emerged from this war, and for that matter, the spilling of civilian life on the Palestinian side. And so this is taking this dimension and seeing in it something very, very contemporary.
Beautiful.
As a matter of fact, I quote my father, who lost 3 of his siblings during the war, returning to Poland in 1959. And he was standing near the ovens of Auschwitz, and he imagined himself in a poem. He thought of the prophecy of the dry bones of Ezekiel, where God says to Ezekiel, will these bones live? And then my father sees himself on a hilltop in Israel, and he sees in their own way they're living. So I want to encourage listeners, when one reads this text, don't be afraid to read into the text original ideas, original thoughts, beautiful. And everyone has something to say.
Beautiful. So I'll pick up from there, and that's so beautiful. Another thing you referenced very slightly before, but I want to have you say a few more words. You know, the last holiday was Purim. We read Megillat Esther. We read the whole story beginning to end. So one might have expected on the Seder night to open the book of Exodus and read all the parshiot before, I guess, Tetzaveh, something like that, where you have the story of what happened from the birth of Moses until we're taken out of Egypt. But instead, that's not what happens. As you said before, we read 4 lines from the book of Deuteronomy, which is the statements that we say when we bring the first fruit. That's so unexpected. What's going on there? What do you think? Why are we reading that instead of the Exodus story?
Because the Exodus is not only the story of freedom from, but it's the story of freedom to. It's not only undoing a civilization like Egypt, which was so evil. It's simple to undo. But can one create something new, something which is spiritually uplifting and flourishing? And so the text will be a text that a farmer recites when bringing the first fruits to Jerusalem, once again pointing to the importance of Israel as part of the Exodus story, let alone the farmer is really, the earliest is the second generation. It's not the first generation. I know you're the second generation. It's a second generation who tells the story as if he was there, as if he experienced the slavery himself.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's and you mentioned also another beautiful thing that you referenced just now that I just want to pull out for our audience. You referenced the complete destruction of Mitzrayim, and you write beautifully in here how the world was created in 10 utterances, and it was also destroyed by 10 makot, 10 plagues, which I thought was beautiful. Let's, in our final minutes here, I want to shift to the future.
Right.
The average person, we have all these songs at the end, Kilo Na'eh, Adir Hu, Echad Miyodeh, who knows one, Haggadah Yehi Ohr. It kind of feels like this, for some people it's like, oh, we're doing all these songs, what's happening here? What's the meaning behind that? Perhaps you could choose maybe Haggadah Yehi Ohr or one of them to add a little bit more.
Well, first, it begins by opening the door for Elijah.
Oh, please, thank you. Let us not forget Elijah.
My children used to ask, why do we have to open the door for Elijah? He's flying around the world. He's drinking all of this wine. He's not drunk. Let him come through the cracks. Well, when they asked the question, I couldn't answer it, but I found it in the writings of Rabbi Kook, where he says Elijah is welcome to the Seder because Elijah is the harbinger of redemption. But if we want redemption to come, we have to get off our hands and open the door.
Beautiful.
Who knows? Maybe the Messiah is knocking at the door, kol dodi dofek. We have to hear the knock.
My beloved knocks.
As much as we're waiting for the Messiah is waiting for us. As much as we yearn for redemption, redemption is yearning for us. As much as we may be searching for God, the great Rabbi Abram Joshua Heschel said, God is searching for us. And so we open the door. And it's a message to all of us that we all should stay humble, but we have the capacity to do our share to make this world a better world. And that's why we get into national redemption prayers. Yivarech et Bet Yisrael. The day will come when God will bless the whole house of Israel. And there's a movement from national redemption to universal redemption, where we say such prayers as Nishmat Kol Chai. The breath of every living being will extol God. Imagine that. Imagine that. When God created the world, what did God really create? He blew into Adam the breath of life. Creation really is the birth of breath. And our challenge is to breathe out what God breathed into us. Nishmat Kol Chai. Will we ever reach the time when the world will not be split as it's split today, with all that's happening, not only in Israel, Russia, Ukraine, all over the world. And sometimes it's so daunting, we feel we have no role to play. But we do have a role to play. And you mentioned the Haggadah. Haggadah is a kind of last song. And in the Haggadah, it's generally understood that we're talking about different characters, and there is a kid, and the kid is eaten by the cat, and the cat is bitten by the dog, and the dog is hit by the stick, And in the end, what prevails? Israel prevails, the world at peace prevails, V'ata Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, prevails. Haggadah Yehi Ohr. And that's a time towards the end of the Seder to kick off our shoes. And around many Siddurim, every participant, when one of those characters are mentioned, they imitate the character.
Roof, roof.
Roof, roof, meow, water spilling.
Right.
But the thought I had was that Haggadah Yehi Ohr may not only mean one kid, Gadya Gedi, but Gadya is from the language Lahagid, one story. And so what we do is we go around the story, around the table, and ask everyone, do you have a story to tell based on the character of the Haggadah Yehi Ohr? And you're embellishing in a humble way how you may have made a difference in the world. So the toughest one for me to anecdotally talk about was the cat. The cat. I knew that there were many cats in Jerusalem.
Yes, yes.
You want to find a cat? Go to
Yes,
Jerusalem.
Yes.
And then it finally hit me. When I was the rabbi of the synagogue, now, thank God, there's my successor, Rabbi Stephen Exler, who on everybody's list has got to be in the top 5 rabbis of the country. He's so absolutely extraordinary and Rabbanit Bracha. So I used to give out these fuzzies, and often they had the faces of a cat. And on the fuzzy, there used to be like a little something that said Rabbi Avi. I never wanted to be called Rabbi Weiss. Rabbi Avi thinks I'm great. And I got the idea from my brother Mordechai, who is a rabbi and a master educator, and he used to give out in his school that he ran in Margate, New Jersey, these fuzzies, the best student. Rav Mordechai thinks I'm great. And I thought maybe I should give it out, but I thought it was a little corny. And in 2006, the Second Lebanon War, I was visiting some troops, and there was a row of tanks, and I met the tank commander. And we start talking, he's an American, and suddenly he, as we're exchanging information, Jewish style, he says, "Oh my God, your brother was my principal in Margate, New Jersey." Wow. And then he looks at me and he says, "And you know what got me through this war?" Puts his hand in his pocket and he pulls out a fuzzy that's all tarred with the tar of the tank. He said, "Rabbi Mordechai's fuzzy got me through these battles." And it was then that I made a decision. I'm giving out these fuzzies in the hundreds. In fact, my brother saw me giving it out. He said to me, "That's not the way you give out fuzzies. You give it out only to the best student." I said, "That's why you're the principal of the school. I'm a rabbi. Everybody gets a fuzzy."
Right.
And the message was, I believe in you. I believe in you. It's so important for people to be believed in, not in a kumbaya way, but every person has the capacity to bring something to the table to further along redemption. Every week on Sunday morning, there are 2 teenagers, Netta and Ari. They organize this walk for the hostages. 2 kids, they're teenagers. They've really made a difference. And there's no one in this world, no one who doesn't have the capacity to make a difference. That's the Haggadah Yehi Ohr.
Beautiful.
That's the message of the Seder. It's not only the message of the darkness and not only the message of the light, but that we can partner with God. We can't do it ourselves. But in partnership with God, we can bring that light. And the more mature we are as a people, like a parent and a child, the more is expected from us to be co-creators with God, to make Am Yisrael and Medinat Yisrael and Kol Yoshvei Tevel a better place.
Wow. Ravi, thank you so much. I feel so moved by everything you've shared. I was already moved just from reading the book, but now hearing your words, I feel, you said, Ein Kedusha bli hachana, there's no holiness without preparation. I feel like this is helping me to prepare meaningfully for the Seder. For our guests at home, I certainly recommend you pick up this book, Haggadah Yehi Ohr, Let There Be Light. pleased with this beautiful, beautiful cover artwork as well, which you'll see on screen, and hopefully you'll pick up and look at carefully, and you'll develop your own midrashot, your interpretations of what's here. Rabbi Avi, wishing you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a happy and meaningful and kosher.
Such a joy to be with you, Rabbi Justin, and just my blessings for much hatzlacha. And to all of our listeners, I know this is a dark time, but it's a remarkable time. It's a remarkable time, and a time of great potential for our people to impact Israel and our people and kol ha'olam kulo and the whole world. And may you be blessed, Justin, and take JBS higher and higher in the spirit of your predecessor and doing it in your way. No one can do it better.
Thank you.
Really love you.
Thank you. I love you too.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I need my hug.
I'll see if I can pull it off without getting unplugged here. Sloan's going to get mad at me. Here we go. We're trying it, Sloan. We might lose the audio, but we'll do one.
Yeah, I love you too.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבשכם